Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education Superintendents Advisory Council meeting. Just a few reminders. If you'd like to comment, please pick up a card from Ms. Rawson. And superintendents, when you go to speak, please make sure your microphones are on and you speak clearly into the mics. And I'll have Ms. Rawson give a roll call for Ms. Lowell.
Dr. Barthelemy is not present. Mr. Burton?
Here.
Mr. Byler?
Here.
Mr. Cole?
Here.
Mr. Corley is not present. Dr. Eloy? Not present. Dr. Fountain is not present. Dr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Geis?
Here.
Mr. Javia?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Dr. Joseph? Not present. Mr. Martin is not present. Dr. Ortling?
Here.
Mr. Powell?
Present.
Ms. Stilley?
Here.
Dr. Stokes?
Here.
Ms. Strong? Not present. Mr. Touche? Not present. Dr. Van Metry?
Present.
Dr. Boron is not present. Dr. Walker?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, the first agenda item is the approval of minutes for February 2025. Can I have a motion to approve? So, Dr. Gray,
Second.
second by Dr. Walker. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. The minutes are approved. Our next agenda item is consideration of revisions to Bulletin 1508, Pupil Appraisal Handbook regarding special education pupil appraisal. Can I get a motion to receive? Mr. Byler, second by Dr. Van Metry. And I will turn it over to our State Superintendent, Dr. Capron.
Thank you, Dr. Ortling. Sorry for my delay. There was a gentleman on the fourth floor of the Capitol that had a lengthy conversation with me this morning that delayed me. I will suggest, I know it's not directly related to this item, but I do want to just speak out about the results that we're seeing with students with disabilities statewide. If you look at results from our LEAP assessments for 3 consecutive years, students with disabilities have shown year-over-year growth. And also, if you look at NAEP, our students with disabilities are both outperforming the national average for light students, but also have absolute performance higher than light students nationally. And so I just want you to go back to August as possible and have some conversations with your special ed team and just say thank you for the work that they're doing in that space. You know, we rolled out the playbook about 2 or 3 years ago. Your teams have overwhelmingly absorbed that and have been a part of that. And it's, you know, it's about providing students with disabilities more time with content area experts and more time on task and tutoring supports. And so I just want to say thank you for that, and thank you for allowing your district level special education team members to participate in some of the statewide collaborations that we've been holding over the last few years. You know, those were not happening for a period of years. And then we got those back rolling, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, and I think it's made a difference. So just want to say thank you for that. And then Meredith has some information she'd like to share relative to personnel.
Good morning. Meredith Jordan, Executive Director for Diverse Learners here at the department. Completely echo those sentiments. Thank you to what you're leading in your school systems and to our educators for all of the work that they're doing to help us grow and continue to improve. So this morning, I am happy to review with you all some proposed revisions to Bulletin 1508, our Pupil Appraisal Handbook, which really governs the way that we conduct child find in our state, the way that we evaluate students with disabilities. Perfection is a process, and so you do have an updated copy with just some last minute technical edits, and I'll talk through some of those as well. So having current and the most updated child find, give me 1 second, I'll try to get the slides moving. Perfect. So having updated child find policies, evaluations, procedures are absolutely crucial to ensuring that all of our students and to continue the work and support that you're currently doing, ensuring that those students suspected of having a disability or having a disability receive those supports and services that they need. And so the next slide really just gives you an overview of Bulletin 1508, the Pupil Appraisal Handbook, what's its purpose. This is really our final special education policy that we really haven't done extensive work in or review in outside of approximately 2 to 3 years ago. We did bring here, and throughout the state and throughout all of our stakeholder groups, we updated our visual impairment criteria. But really outside of that, haven't done an extensive review in Bulletin 1508, and so this was a huge undertaking for our team who are sitting there in the back, and give them a lot of credit for helping work through this process. The revisions before you looked at all other language and sections really outside of that visual impairment section, and you'll see there are a lot. So just a reminder, there are some things that we can accomplish and have some state specifics, but we also had to keep in mind as we worked alongside stakeholders that everything that we do also still has to align with IDEA. Any prescriptions or prescribed timelines that are in IDEA, we have to stay steadfast to those. But there are some things, of course, in state policy that we can do. Many perspectives, many experts were involved in this. As you can see in Bulletin 1508, it addresses our eligibility criteria for all of our disability learning categories, those eligibility requirements, all of our related services. So all of those individuals were brought to the table in this. We have shaped these recommended changes over about a 6-month at least period. Our team engaged all of these relevant stakeholders that you see here, from APE, assistive technology, OT, PT, school health services, mental health services, social workers, speech language pathologists, our ed diags, our school psychs. All of those individuals were brought to the table. We're also meeting regularly now with our pupil appraisal teams and pupil appraisal leads across the state, providing additional support. So we had a lot of opportunities to also talk with those individuals as well as we shaped these recommendations. We facilitated probably over half a dozen collaborative meetings. That's probably shooting low. Even more one-on-one or small group consults with experts to really give a comprehensive look here. And so we have all of these professionals, clinicians in the field. If you remember several years ago, we also had a related service commission, so we had a lot of those people at the table pretty regularly. Some of the recommendations here kind of follow through from that group as well. And we'll also bring these changes next week to SEEP, our state special education panel, as well for further refinement and feedback. So like I said, perfection is a process, but hopefully I wanted to pull out some high level, some key edits that I think include some high level changes for you all, for your teams, that either remove some possible challenges for them, remove some burdens, add ease to their work, to these processes. We know, we talk with a lot of parents, special education processes can be very complex, are very complex. So we want to remove some challenges any way that we can with our teams, with that goal of providing better supports to our kids. We added language that adds some support and clarity for our pupil appraisal teams. A lot of what you see were things that they recommended and asked and said, hey, if you include this, it will make it better, it will make it easy for us to provide those needed services. So just a couple of these specifics. I think I have two remaining slides, and then we can kind of talk through in whatever more detail that you all would like. One suggestion we received was to add licensed specialists in school psychology and licensed psychologists with a school specialty. Those added professionals is a significant allowability for our school systems, for our pupil appraisal teams and school psychologists to have additional and added capacity and additional assistance where they need it. So this was really important for us to, as we've talked with a lot of pupil appraisal teams in thinking about challenges and shortages that you may have in finding some of those specialty areas. If our state language is a little bit too limiting, right, so it adds that capacity for you all. Within the speech impairment section, I believe that's section 721, we added speech pathologist assistants there. So those are still licensed individuals who can help support your speech language pathologist in giving some assessments, providing some intervention, and working alongside your school, your speech language pathologist. So adding some of those capacities for you all through pupil appraisal teams, they were really appreciative and thought this would really help them and open up their capacity. The second one that you see here, this has really always been the case, and we hope that we are communicating very clearly. It's been communicated very clearly to states by the U.S. Department of Ed that evaluations should not be delayed or denied solely based on movement through tiered interventions when you clearly suspect a disability. And so we added that language in there very clearly in section 301. I'll give you a real clear example of that, right? So when you suspect or you know there are visual impairments because a student is coming and those supports, those needs are very, very clear. There may be medical diagnosis. We do not and should not move those students through some sort of tiered intervention, right? We can go ahead, open up that evaluation and provide any supports and services that they may need. So we added that really clear statement. Additionally, many of our school systems already do this, but we added statements and really clear language about comprehensive evaluations considering any suspected delays, any additional disabilities, essentially adding that our pupil appraisal teams should look at the entire student and any concerns that may be there. We're going to evaluate, we're going to look for all of those things that may exist together based on any referral data, any information that you may have. While this is also a clarification, we believe it's an important one. We believe it's a needed clarification and connection to our best instructional practices. A lot of the supports that we've been given, and like Dr. Brumley said, many of your teams, our school systems, our special education teams are moving around special education best practices. We did update our definition and description of response to intervention. It is one of the first opportunities we've actually taken to codify some of our best practice work into policy language, really defining high quality intervention within our RTI model in this policy. And so we did add some language there. You'll also notice several places where we added the language to provide access to general curriculum, really signaling to our special educators, our general educators as well, reiterating that the foundation of special education is general education. These are all supports and services that are intended to have them accessing as much as possible high quality teaching and learning. And so we took that opportunity around that section to clarify some of that and support some of the work that clearly we know you all are doing with some of the results we're seeing. So just a few more. Our school psychologist gave us some really valuable input on updating the language around the exceptionality of autism, aligning that terminology with the latest research and the latest medical definitions of how that disability manifests within students. We did that in just a few other disability-specific updates as well. Really clarifying that mental health diagnosis, mood, anxiety disorders, those are better appropriately addressed under emotional disturbance. And these, again, were some clarifications that pupil appraisal teams really wanted us to provide. Tell us where some of those things that may cross the line of other health impairment or fit in that emotional disability category. So we added all of those, some of that recommended language. We updated policy language around reevaluations for related services. We updated some language that reevaluations should not go through 2 years of reevaluation cycle. So every 3 years, we are required to conduct a reevaluation. One of the things that we wanted to be really clear about best practice, unless requested by a parent, that we shouldn't go 6 or more years without current assessments for these students. So we talked a lot about with pupil appraisal staff. We actually created a process probably 4 years ago called a reevaluation data review process. So many of our school systems are already doing this in making sure at a reevaluation we're considering all of that data. But of course, if a parent says, no, I don't want any more assessments, I don't want further data on my student, I feel really good about where we are, we can't take that right of a parent to say, no, I don't want any more testing away. But what we know is we shouldn't get 6 years down the road, 9 years down the road, and we don't see some current data on our students within a reevaluation. We also had a lot of conversation around Bulletin 1903. We have very specific state legislation now and required dyslexia screeners, and we had pupil appraisal teams saying, please pull that over to 1508, make the connections there, so that we can make sure that those screenings are happening, and then we take the preponderance of that evidence, and within specific learning disability, we can note those concerns of dyslexia as well, in alignment with state law, with what we've already codified in Bulletin 1903. And so we did that. That is a pretty significant shift here. We have never had a specific section that says, in addition to your specific learning disability evaluation, here are some additional steps you take as part of a pupil appraisal team if you suspect dyslexia. And really, though, we already know we have a responsibility to identify those students, and it's in state law. It makes a lot of sense to make the connection here in 1508. Another shift, one of the last ones that I'll talk with you about, that removes some burden for pupil appraisal teams is this shift from only accepting doctors' diagnoses and doctors' notes from adjacent states. And we opened that up and said we will accept a doctor's notes from any of the United States. And I think that's going to, we're not real sure why that was there, and I think this is one of those clear places where you all and your teams tell us, hey, help us out here. And we're certainly happy to do that. And that is going to prevent you all or your teams from having to go to parents and say, no, I can't accept this doctor's note, I can't accept this diagnosis, now I need you to go to another doctor here a little bit closer, and then we'll recognize it. And so that seemed like a really clear place that our pupil appraisal teams were asking us to help them out with, and we were happy to do that and lifting that burden. Finally, there were many technical edits. There were a lot of cleanups aligning to other legislation, for example, that certified school nurses now must be registered nurses, so we changed that here as well. We repealed any unnecessary language. There were places in 1508 where we really felt like our youngest children, ages 3 to 5, weren't referenced and were really left out, and we know that's been in place, you're doing that. And so that was really just what we considered a cleanup, but we have a responsibility to conduct child fine on those youngest students as well. And so those are the highest level, most impactful, I think, changes that we did here in 1508. So I'm happy to talk through, answer any questions, take any additional feedback. Perfectionism process, like I said, we're still going to seek next week to get some feedback from them as well.
Okay, council, we'll open it up for discussion, comments, questions.
Dr. Ortman, one comment is that, as Meredith said, this will go to the special ed advisory panel, and they are, not to say you are not, but they are highly qualified experts in this particular body of work.
And I'll just say this, I know my team reviewed the changes with Ms. Meredith, and they were very appreciative of the changes and the detail that went into changes.
I'm glad.
They also mentioned how important it was to add the flexibility for the certification of the school, whereas previous version, you were required to have the school psychologist. Now the flexibility, really, and those are very hard to find. So that flexibility is very much appreciated. Any other comments, questions?
I move that we endorse the recommendation.
Okay, we have a move to endorse the recommended revisions to Bulletin 1508 by Mr. Jeffrey Powell.
Second.
Second, Mr. Burton. All in favor, so you must say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you
Endorsed
all.
by the council. Yes, ma'am. Okay, that moves us to agenda item 3.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 118, statewide assessment standards and practices regarding cell phones during state testing. I will turn it over to the superintendent.
I want to kick it off.
Entertain a motion to receive, I'm sorry, yes. Mr. Tommy Violet,
Second.
second. Dr. Walker, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Brown.
Thank you. So just basically consistent with what your students experience when they take nationally recognized exams such as ACT, et cetera, we're trying to align the cell phone policy here. And so Mr. Lambert, can you make this presentation?
Sure. We're also attempting to bring some consistency across the way that school systems approach these types of issues when they occur. Some school systems automatically void the assessment when a phone is found. Some are only voiding if they find information on the test, on the phone, that suggests that the kid accessed the phone during the testing period. So the first one just clarifies that if a student has the phone in their possession at the time that the test is occurring, the test is voided. And then the second revision provides for the first time an exception if you have a student who has a health condition that requires them to have their phone nearby. For example, for glucose monitoring, that's becoming a much more common thing to be done through the phone. So we're putting that exception in policy to really clarify that that's okay, and create a process and a form so that folks can submit that to us and let us know that that's occurring, and then it's all good. So those are the two revisions. Happy to take any feedback on them.
Okay, we'll open it up to the council for any questions, comments.
No longer, it's the law, right, each year, so
They
I
are.
haven't had that issue anymore. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Appreciate that.
Also, your teachers, whenever I had Superintendent Advisory Council several months ago, and then we had it again about a month ago, cell phones were discussed, and I would say overwhelmingly, your teachers were very positive about it, and they were not just positive about, the benefits, but also positive about your implementation. So it seems like you all have done a really good job on implementation. Except for one district, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just kidding.
So, Mr. Lambert, this is very small in detail, but when you look at the revisions of 118, number 2, just when I read number 2, it's very lengthy and hard. It took me several reads to truly understand what was being stated. While I understood it, there may be some better language to use, just a consideration, or we say regardless of the presence or lack of material. First of all, should we define testing material? Like we say material, that's just one suggestion. And the other is perhaps instead of saying regardless of the presence or lack of material, regardless of whether testing material is present. I can give you this copy after, just as a recommendation. And then the second part, number 4, in number 2, you reference the test will be voided, but in number 4, you say the test score of the student will be voided. Just consistency of language between those two.
Thank you.
Any other comments, feedback? No public comment? Do I have a motion to endorse?
Make a motion.
Ms. Staley,
I'll second.
silent, and Dr. Walker. All in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next agenda item is 3.3, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding educator preparation, evaluation, and credentials. And can I entertain a motion to receive? Dr. Van Meeden, Metri, and Mr. Jaldia.
So Dr. Joffrion will make this report, but while he opens up his binder, I want to just let everyone know that we were able to meet a couple of days ago and talk about the work with aspiring leaders and new leaders within school systems. And I really think that that's a place where we have a ton of opportunity to support. If you have individuals that you'd like to see step into a leadership role at some point, us having programming to support those things I think is helpful, especially if you don't necessarily have capacity within your district office to assign someone to principal development, which I know a great deal of our systems don't necessarily have that capacity. And so you'll be hearing more about the aspiring principal work, and I think it's good and quality work, and I'm thankful for Dr. Joe Ferron and his new team member for leading on that.
Good morning. Arthur Joffrion, Department of Education. We'll share several updates with you regarding some policies that reside in the Office of Teaching and Learning, specifically in the wheelhouse of educator talent and workforce development. At the April DESE, LDOE is going to be proposing policy revisions to 3 primary bulletins. Bulletin 130, which is our regulations for evaluation and assessment of school personnel. Bulletin 996, which is standards for approval of teacher and or leader preparation programs. And Bulletin 746, which is Louisiana State standards for state certification of school personnel. Policy that we are recommending changes around align with other policy as well as system capabilities and updates to align with recommendations from the Computer Science Commission and the English Language Learner Task Force. The revisions to Bulletin 130 are regarding evaluation reporting. The department is removing outdated reporting requirements and replacing them with requirements that align to the new reporting capabilities of the new evaluation system. The language on the slide shows the first revisions to this policy and what will remain in policy once all the revisions are made to Part A of this section. The information that will now be required to be submitted will all be retrieved from the LES portion of LEP. The LDOE will be able to retrieve all information from the system and will alleviate the burden of LEAs having to submit data to us. Policy Revision 2 to Part B of Section 701 includes additional reporting capabilities and required in the new evaluation system. In Part B, the requirements include the final rating score and the percentages and the numbers where available of teachers, leaders, and counselors rated as exemplary, highly effective, proficient, emerging, and ineffective. This solidifies our previous requirements, and all information will be found in the LES system, meaning no burden to local school systems. I always forget to change the slide, sorry. Bulletin 996 changes are specific to computer science. The department is updating teacher preparation policy to align with computer science legislation as well as the Computer Science Commission recommendations. Previous policy included the introduction that computer science coursework would be required in teacher preparation coursework beginning in 26-27. The updates here include some details of the topics that would be required to be covered in the computer science coursework. So you can see that the coursework shall include the following, but it's not limited to the following. It will include an introduction to the K-12 Louisiana content standards for computer science, I do want to stress that these content standards do cover the gamut of kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Preparation providers will also be required to have an overview of computational thinking and computer science content, including broad knowledge of computing systems, internet safety, and data analysis to enhance student learning, as well as an overview of standards-based instruction based on the core concepts and practices found within the Louisiana Computer Science Framework. The changes here to Bulletin 746 will now be aligned with what is has just been reviewed with you in 996. Beginning in 2030, 2031, all certification areas will require this coursework or contact hours that include instruction on teaching students computer science. These will be included in many cases in current coursework that our preparation providers are adding, and all of these will be reviewed by the LDOE to ensure they are in alignment with the content standards that have been are being created. Specific language that's added in the policy is here on the slide, and I just want to reiterate that all certification areas will have to have this computer science as part of their coursework for teachers to be eligible for Louisiana certification.
And Dr. Chofron, that aligns with legislation, right? That's,
Yes, sir. It aligns with current legislation as well as the Computer Science Commission recommendations. Another change being made to Bulletin 746 specific to computer science and in response to the field, and I wish that Jared Martin would be here because he and I have had hours of conversation around this. But in response to the field, the LDOE is removing the literacy requirement that was recently added to non-core secondary specialty content areas. You can see here on the slide the two sections of policy that will be removed at April Bessie.
Dr. Johnson, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just real quick, is that also the same concern that Mr. Purvis had from Livingston Parish relative to their content teachers? Do you happen to recall?
I don't recall the specific content he had, but notice this is secondary non-core.
Correct.
I'm pretty certain that's the case.
I think he made it a point last time I talked to him that he had concern. He sent me some correspondence back and forth, but I think that does solve it. So thank you.
Yep, and again, this is in response to conversations that we've had with the field.
Dr. Friend, thank you for all this information. I just want to, I hate to do like a specific example, but I think we may have had the same conversation as well. We had a secondary teacher getting their add-on ag certification that is being required to do the literacy training. So is my understanding correct that this policy change will eliminate that requirement for those types of add-ons?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, anything that's not math, science, social studies, or reading.
So that person who is currently taking the courses to get his certification and has paid that, he still, because we're currently under that policy, has to continue on and complete that.
Right, and remember that the policy will go to Bessie, but then the policy is placed on notice of intent, meaning that it could take 3 months typically for it to come off of notice of intent. So if someone wants to have that certification now, then they should continue in the vein that they're moving forward, knowing that this will take some time to go into effect.
But if they want it for next school year. You've answered my question. Thank you.
From Bessie's perspective, I would not rely on this rule for the upcoming school year because it's going to be very tight when it comes off of notice of intent. I would expect August or September probably, or somewhere around that, give or take.
August.
Yeah.
August 20th would probably be the earliest that this would go into full effect.
Thank you.
All right, shifting gears to English language learners. So the EL Task Force has made recommendations for teacher preparation programs to include instruction on teaching language acquisition strategies to support EL learners. This can be included in already existing coursework, and further competencies are being developed in conjunction with a work group, including teacher preparation providers, as well as many of your system leads who are working in the EL space. This is set to begin in the 27-28 school year, and you can see the specific policy language that will go into effect here on the slide. In order to have policy 996 and bulletin 746 in alignment, we are making recommendations to 746. In 2031-2032 school year, certification team will be looking for coursework that includes the EL coursework mentioned earlier to include the necessary competencies. And if you notice, all certification areas will be required to have this EL coursework included in their program. The LDOE will do a coursework review prior to this date to ensure that it is in alignment with the work of the EL Task Force. Dr. Brumley, that concludes my updates, and I'm happy to take any questions.
We'll open it up to the council. Any questions, comments? We have no public comment. Dr. Joffron, thank you. Can I entertain a motion to endorse the changes to Bulletin 130, 746, and 996? Dr. Stokes. Second by Mr. Powell. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Motion passes. So our next agenda item is consideration of an update report regarding Act 650, Numeracy Screener, and Act 260, Numeracy Skills Training. Motion to receive by Mr. Byler, second by Mr. Powell.
Yes, sir. So what we wanted to do is just provide an update report, much like we've done over the reading work over the last few years in response to legislation. We wanted to make sure that we had a platform for conversation around some of the numeracy legislation that's passed over the last couple of years. In 24, Act 650 passed, dealing with the numeracy screener that will go into effect for next year. And then the year prior in 23, Act 260 passed, where your 4th through 8th grade teachers had to begin their math training consistent with what your K-3 teachers did for literacy. And so Dr. Chasson will make this report.
Good morning, everyone. Jenna Chasson, Department of Education. Just first, a little update on the numeracy screener. So next year, the numeracy screener will be administered for kindergarten through 3rd grade, and it will be considered a learning year, meaning that every kindergarten through 3rd grade student will be administered the screener, but during this learning year, scores may not be reported, and they will not be used in school performance scores. This will give a time frame for testing the items and then determining cut scores as well. It will be administered during all 3 windows of the screener, and the windows will align with the literacy screener administration. This is just a little timeline for you all to see what has transpired over the last several years and then what's to come. The learning year in 25-26, followed by the full statewide administration of both the literacy and numeracy screeners in 26-27. Our team is hard at work on the numeracy screener across our assessment content and academic content teams as they really think about what will be the best items and the best item types to inform upcoming instruction for educators, for school leaders, and for you all at the district level. So we're really looking forward to the administration of the numeracy screener. and are doing absolutely everything we can to make sure that we get it right.
I know you said that the scores will not be released, but will the districts receive those scores just during that learning year?
Our concern is around making sure that it all psychometrically aligns. So we could provide like raw score type data, but it would be challenging to really make a whole lot of interpretations based off of that data. So yes, we could provide, in a way that we have not done with other standardized assessments, a little bit more data in this learning year, particularly around item types that are like, can the student count forward from 1 to 10? Can they count backward from 10 to 1? And then you have to make your own assumptions about those different types of things. Some of the items we might be a little bit less straightforward, like one version of a question might be a little bit harder that psychometrics would try to adjust for, but we certainly can provide some information to guide, and maybe we'll learn over the course of the year that we can provide a whole lot more. But we're still kind of in that drafting and getting to a place where we're really comfortable with all the item types. But so far what I've seen, it's going to be a relatively short screener, and it's going to give really impactful data to teachers in the long term to inform, like the third grade information at the end of the year is really going to tell a fourth grade teacher what it is that these third graders are lacking in foundational skills. So we're really excited. Jenna's team is working closely with my team in both academic content, assessment content, and diverse learners all at the table to really understand what we're trying to measure here and how to inform instructional practice.
And Mr. Berger, too, I think it's certainly something we would welcome is as we go through the year with it, if there is information that you think would be helpful, just to maintain an ongoing conversation around what we can provide, because we're going to be learning through the year just like you're going to be learning.
Thank you.
As you talk about this, and obviously school performance scores, I'm going to ask you a question. So next year we're rolling out a new accountability formula, but at the same time, what does K-3 numeracy and literacy look like? I mean, we already are testing our third graders. We're just trying to figure out how that new system works. What are we looking at when we say, it's going to be part of school performance scores? I would hope that we would get some advanced ideas of what K-3 literacy and numeracy screeners are going to look like in the new formula.
Yeah, so once we get through the spring administration this year, we'll have 2 solid years of consistent full year implementation of the screener. We'll be able to provide simulations of what that will look like. The numeracy screener will not go into accountability for quite some time. It won't be next year, it won't be the year after that. So we want to have 2 solid years of data so that we can look at growth measures, so that we can look at absolute achievement, and really make good decisions around that. So we're going to need 2 years of data before we can do anything with that. And we're only into our second year of a full year of implementation of the K-3 screener.
If I could just follow up. So right now, next year with the new accountability system, there's not been a clearly defined category for K-3 literacy, although we are in our second year. So K-3 literacy will not be included in next year's accountability scores for our students.
They will not be in the 24-25 scores, which are this year, that are released in the fall. They could potentially be in the 25-26 once we get the spring data and we have a chance to look at it and have further discussions with you all about the ways in which we would incorporate K-3 into that. But the current policy essentially says that it goes into the ELA component, it goes into the math component. That's already captured in the policy.
And my other question revolves around the screener itself. So am I understanding correctly that the department is developing the numeracy screener, whereas obviously with the literacy piece we had a valid and reliable instrument relative to DIBELS. How will you test the validity and reliability of this instrument based on your testing over the next 2 years? Are you all using any other non-referenced examples? Like, how is that being developed, I guess?
In a very similar way to the way that we do lead testing and those types of development, you identify achievement level descriptors that then help you determine where exactly a student needs to be at proficiency. And you use those with educators to identify if you got the cut scores right or incorrectly. So we have a very standardized process that we do that for LEAP. Some of your teachers, some of you may have participated in those different type of bookmarking activities, but we do have a standardized process that we follow.
I guess the only concern with that, I would probably say, is that those would be, like, while teachers are educated in the profession of teaching, they're not they're not professionals in test developing and or assessment writing. So are there any other opportunities to pair with, and I'm just throwing this out here, some type of national organization that has a standard and a history of developing appropriate assessments? Not saying that the department can't, I don't want that to be assumed, but when you talk about reliability and, you know, the validity of an instrument, when we're talking about professionals, that is not their primary focus or job responsibility. It's hard to hang our hat on something like this for a long period.
Absolutely. So we're partnering with an entity that will provide the assessment platform itself. They also do psychometric work. We will work closely with them. We also have psychometricians on our teams, and we also have content in both assessment and instruction experts on our teams, and we have done this many times where the process that we go through with teachers and educators is not it's not a psychometric process. We talk to them about what the expectations are for this particular standard. We then take field test data. We show them in order of what we think the complexity is. They identify where they think that this is where we're going from basic to mastery, and they put a spot in the bookmark. There's several different really recognized ways to do it, and we're confident in our ability to do that, and we'll be open to feedback as we go through the next 2 years.
So we're really excited about the numeracy screener because in our minds we are really hoping that we can also eventually get to the point where we can progress monitor between assessments. But I do have a quick question. Is the assessment going to be administered whole group, or is it more of an individual assessment, or does that depend on the grade level?
At this time, it's looking individual. We are exploring ways in which we can separate the components out to potentially be some of it on the computer independently and then some of it one-on-one being done. You can imagine as you're working with a student to use manipulatives, it's really hard to do that whole group, right? Particularly when you look at kindergartners. So we're spending a lot of time with our academic content, assessment content, and our diverse learners team to really try to get this right before we bring the draft to teacher and educator committees.
Thomas, it's also true that, you know, in working with those groups, that we have also tried to provide a priority around like the amount of time that the student takes doing it. So it's not taking them an extended amount of time. It's a quick hit to know where they are and then moving on.
Yeah, we're looking at 5 minutes or less to be in and out on that screener. And in terms of progress monitoring, all of the work that I've seen coming out of the team is very easily reproduced by a teacher. Once they've given the screener, they're going to very easily be able to go, I know exactly how to do this in my classroom because of the way in which it's actually done. It's how do you take this number and get to this number with the manipulative. So it's going to drive instructional practice and create a really cool progress monitoring tool that teachers can just implement once a week, every other week, in whole group or in small group or individual.
Thank you. Knowing that bit of information about the possibility of it being individualized helps us because like right now, coming up in April, we have a lot of testing happening, a lot of moving pieces in each school. So that'll help us to plan for next year, knowing that we have another individualized assessment.
Dr. Chad.
Dr. Chad, I didn't mean to interrupt. Or somebody did. Are you finished with this part of it?
I'm finished with this part, yeah. We might be done with time.
Any other, I apologize. Any other comments, questions? Okay, Dr. Chesson.
Okay, we'll move on to the next part of the update, which is around the required numeracy training, which came out during the 2023 legislative session, at which time, we were tasked with developing a training that would really be worth 4th through 8th grade math educators' time. And, you know, I think we really worked very hard on this with our partners over at the Dana Center to create a numeracy training that I think is really top-notch and very much worthy of our 4th through 8th grade math educators' time. And so I wanted to first highlight 2 systems, the City of Monroe and Bridgeland, who are over 50% complete at this time, which is fantastic. That's a really good place to be. And we have a lot of our math educators, most of them across the state, according to our data, enrolled currently in the numeracy training on our Louisiana professional learning platform. This is some feedback that we've received from educators across the state. In our numeracy community of practice, we have over 50 educators who have volunteered their time to take the training and provide feedback along the way. We've been able to make adjustments to the training to make sure that it was meeting educators' needs. And we've also worked really hard to ensure alignment of the numeracy training to high-quality instructional materials that are being used in classrooms across the state, and also to the Louisiana Educator rubric. So I just wanted to remind everyone about this training and the completion date. This one, we had a longer runway from the legislation to develop the training because there was really nothing, as I would call it, off the shelf, like there was for our science of reading training originally. And so we took the time to develop that training and gave you all a runway to prepare for it during that time. But it is a faster time period in order to complete the training. So just highlighting for everyone that completion needs to take place by August 1st of this year. And so that is a tighter timeline than everyone had for the science of reading training that was required. So just want to continue to encourage the numeracy contacts in every district to monitor progress. So they are able to pull reports and communicate with school leaders about the progress of your math educators in 4th through 8th grades. And then I also wanted to just share with you all that we've also developed a similar training for kindergarten through 3rd grade and for high school grade levels. So that's something you all should definitely consider, especially as we go into the summer months and we think about professional development. We think about what you might emphasize and encourage your educators to do through your own PD system. And so those are available and I think are equally of high quality as the required 4th through 8th grade training. I have one more note that is related to required training, but is actually on the science of reading training. I just wanted to note for you all that new kindergarten through 3rd grade leaders and teachers do still need to take the science of reading training. And so they do not necessarily have to take the one that you worked with a vendor off the vendor guide for, because we now have our Louisiana Art and Science of Teaching Reading training available free of charge on our professional learning platform. So anyone who is new next year, a new leader or a new teacher to kindergarten through 3rd grade, does need to still take that science of reading training that is now available for free on our platform. We did, if you all remember, several years ago, based on legislation, we updated coursework and praxis requirements to include the science of reading in reading coursework for our education preparation providers. But I also wanted to note that that does not impact this incoming cohort. So if you all are hiring new graduates going into next school year, they have not necessarily had that updated coursework and that new praxis at this point. There was, again, somewhat of a runway for our education preparation providers to prepare for that and to prepare their students for the new praxis exam. So we will let you know when you are receiving that new cohort. When you do receive that new cohort who has been through that updated coursework in science of reading, they will still be required to do some training of a 2.0 version of the science of reading that we will communicate with you about when we get to that cohort.
Thinking about that just from an HR standpoint, as a district superintendent, anyone new that's coming in, you might just make it a part of your HR onboarding process to check to see if they already have that. And if they don't have it, then you can utilize our modules that we have at no cost to you to make sure that they get it. But I do think it's been really impactful. That training has been really impactful. And so I think making sure that anyone that's coming into your classrooms has that training is good. The other piece is hopefully graduates from colleges of education want to come out better prepared moving forward, both on the reading piece, but I know we're doing some work on making sure that they better understand the way in which they'll be evaluated too. So hopefully those are two shifts you'll see coming out of the colleges of ed.
Okay, open it up to the council for any questions, comments.
Question. Jason, first of all, thank you for the numeracy training. It is outstanding. Is there going to be an opportunity to replace the Louisiana content leader, which is another 40, 50 hours in the past has been a requirement for our CR schools with Act 260?
We are currently having discussions about the future of content leader, and I'm happy to gather any feedback from you and your team, Superintendent Burton. It does seem like some of that content leader kind of crosses a little bit, or even a lot at times, with some of the same content that's found in these trainings. Content leader is in policy, and so that's something we have to visit around the policy changes that would be required, in our schools with academic labels, that also make it a certification option. So those are things that we're discussing right now because we do know that there's a lot of overlap in that content. So happy for any feedback on it.
The language in Super Act seems to lead that it's no longer a requirement with CR. Can you clarify that?
So it's a requirement that you either have a trained content leader or you are partnering with a vendor who is from that approved list who can provide your training.
Okay.
Do you expect any update to Bulletin 1566 progression relative to numeracy training or numeracy screening requirements for next year?
Yes, in Bulletin 741.
Will it be reflected in pupil progression as well?
It will be reflected in pupil progression as well.
Hearing no other comments and no public comment, we'll move to agenda item 3.5, consideration of an update report regarding third grade retention and promotion. Can I entertain a motion to receive? Dr. Demetri, second. Dr. Gray. Dr. Brumley or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think we've talked about this enough in SAC over the last 2 years, so we thought we would hit it one more time. So we wanted to provide once again an update report regarding third grade retention and promotion, and Dr. Chasson will provide the report.
So just a few things we haven't yet discussed as a Superintendent's Advisory Council to call to your attention today. One is that we did make some adjustments. We received feedback from several of you about our end-of-year schedule for the third grade implementation of the literacy screener. We heard that that would be problematic based on some of your school calendars, and so we did make some adjustments that I just wanted to call to your attention. They're listed out here around that first administration, the second attempt, and then the third and final attempt. I do think we were able to land in a place where we reached some consensus that is helpful for your school calendars, but also takes heed of, I think, what was required in the law and also what was intended in the legislation. So I just wanted to make that note for you all. Secondly, just to highlight the importance of summer learning and ensuring that you have those highly effective teachers who are trained in the science of reading to work with this particular group of students who are either between their second and third attempt or even after their third attempt that you would want to work with through a summer learning program. And that during that summer learning program, this subset of students is being provided with really solid, explicit instruction based on the science of reading to get them where they need to be for next school year. Also wanted to highlight for you all that we've talked a lot about good cause exemptions and how they are listed out, particularly in the legislation and in the policy. But I wanted to highlight that there should be some documentation when using good cause exemption. And this little bulleted list on the slide really outlines the steps of what should take place when you all are considering a good cause exemption to take place, and that there should be documentation for why or why not this exemption is taking place. And then finally, and I think the most important part of today's update is to call your attention to what happens in that next year. If you all have read the actual legislation around third grade promotion, it's quite lengthy. And so not only does it list out the good cause exemptions, but it lists out what should happen for these students in the following school year, whether they are repeating the third grade or whether they are going on to fourth grade due to a good cause exemption. If they are falling in that well below category, it is very explicitly named in the law what should happen for these students during next school year. So I wanted to make sure that that was really top of mind for you all. That parent notification, progress monitoring and intervention plan, the time that that student spends in a reading block and an intervention block, and the teacher that they have access to during that repeated year in third grade is not only very important to ensure their success and their growth, but it's also listed in the law. And then similarly, for our students who are promoted to fourth grade because they have that good cause exemption that is approved, they also will need that individual academic support plan, just with good communication to the families, and also LEA support to schools and teachers for strategy implementation. And that concludes the third grade promotion update.
Okay, any comments, questions for Dr. Chesson?
I'd just like to say thank you for listening on the second attempt scheduling. We were one of the ones who voiced some concern, and this right here makes it so much easier logistically for us to get those kids tested. Thank you.
Okay, any other comment, questions? Thank you, Dr. Chesson. No public comment? With that said, the next meeting for the council is June 5th, 2025. That concludes our meeting.